Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling a moment in history that didn't just cause a ripple, it literally reshaped an entire subcontinent. We're talking about the Great Uprising of 1857 in India. So how on earth did a rumor about a rifle cartridge, a single cartridge, spark a war that went up against the might of an empire? It sounds almost impossible, right? Well, to get to that explosion, we have to look at the 100 years of pressure that was building up just beneath the surface. All right, so let's set the stage. For a solid century, starting right after the Battle of Plassey in 1757, you've got the British East India Company. And let's be clear, they weren't just a trading company anymore. They were playing a whole different game, a systematic takeover of India. You can see it right here. From Bengal in the east all the way to Punjab in the north, a series of major wars brought huge chunks of the subcontinent under the company's control. But here's the thing, they were also incredibly clever and pretty ruthless about expanding their power without always having to fire a shot. Okay, so one of their key tools was something called the subsidiary alliance. This was honestly a work of genius from a political control standpoint. Basically, Indian kingdoms were kind of strong-armed into accepting the British as the top dogs. They had to give up control of their foreign policy and, get this, pay for the British troops stationed in their own lands to keep them in line. They were kings and princes, but only in name. And then, if that wasn't enough, along comes Lord Dalhousie with his doctrine of lapse. This one was a direct shot at the heart of royal succession. The rule was simple. If a ruler died without a natural-born son, poof, their kingdom was just annexed, taken over by the company. This completely ignored the long-standing tradition of adopting an heir, which just infuriated powerful rulers like Rani Lakshmibai of Jhansi and Nana Sahib. But the move that really pushed things over the edge for a lot of people was the annexation of Awadh. The British just walked in and took it over, using the excuse that the local ruler wasn't doing a good job. Now, why was this such a big deal? Because a staggering 75,000 of the company's own Indian soldiers, their sepoys, came from Awadh. Imagine that. The very men fighting for the British suddenly found out that their employers had just conquered their homes. And it wasn't just about politics. The economic side of things was just as aggressive. I mean, you don't even have to take my word for it. This quote from a British official, John Sullivan, says it all. He literally called their system a sponge, soaking up all the good stuff from India's Ganges River and squeezing it out on the banks of the Thames in London. And this system was perfectly designed to make Britain rich at India's expense. Think about it. Cheap raw materials like cotton and silk were shipped out of India. They'd get turned into expensive clothes and textiles in English factories, and then sold right back to the Indian people at a huge markup. Meanwhile, heavy taxes on Indian-made goods absolutely crushed the local industries, the ones that had been world famous for centuries. And on top of that, land policies were pushing farmers deep into debt, leading to thousands losing their ancestral lands. So you've got the political anger, the economic ruin. But it went even deeper than that. For many Indians, it felt like the British were launching a full-blown assault on their culture, their traditions, their very faith. And this right here really shows you the heart of the problem. It was a total clash of worldviews. The British brought in things like railways and telegraphs, which they saw as modernization, right? Progress. But many Orthodox Indians saw something very different. They saw people from all different castes being forced to sit together, and to them, that was a deliberate attack on their social order. The British passed social reforms, like banning the practice of sati, which they saw as humane, but to many, it was just unforgivable meddling in sacred religious customs. Now, let's look inside the company's own army, because the sepoys, the Indian soldiers, were absolutely simmering with resentment. First off, the pay. They earned something like 8 times less than their British counterparts. They could never be promoted beyond the rank of subedar. And then came new rules that just felt like a direct slap in the face to their religious beliefs. A big one was the General Service Enlistment Act. It forced them to serve overseas, but for many high-caste Hindus, crossing the ocean was a huge taboo that could get them cast out of their community. So let's recap. You've got a century of pressure building. You have political anger, economic devastation, cultural and religious anxiety, and deep resentment within the military. The whole situation was a tinderbox, just waiting. All it needed was a single spark. And that spark arrived in 1856 in the form of a brand new weapon, the Enfield P-53 rifle. This thing was a serious upgrade from their old muskets. So, what was the big deal? Well, it all came down to the loading process. To get this new rifle ready to fire, a soldier had to bite off the top of the paper cartridge with his teeth before pouring the gunpowder into the barrel. And that's when the rumor started, a rumor that spread like wildfire through every barracks in the country. The grease used on those cartridges, the stuff they had to put in their mouths, was made from cow and pig fat. Now, for Hindu soldiers, the cow is sacred. For Muslim soldiers, the pig is forbidden. For both groups, biting that cartridge wasn't just gross, it was a profound act of religious defilement. This wasn't seen as an accident. It was seen as a deliberate plot by the British to destroy their faiths, to maybe even forcibly convert them to Christianity. And for one young soldier, a sepoy named Mangal Pandey, this was the absolute last straw. On March 29, 1857, he attacked his British officers, and with that, he fired the first shot of the Great Rebellion. From that one act of defiance, the revolt just exploded across northern India. And even though the British eventually, and with incredible brutality, managed to crush it, the uprising was so widespread, so shocking to them, that it forced a complete and total overhaul of how they ruled India. And this slide just lays it out so clearly. The change was massive. First and foremost, the East India Company? Gone. A private company was no longer ruling a subcontinent. India was now under the direct rule of the British Crown. The title of Governor General was replaced with Viceroy, who was the Queen's personal representative. The old policy of just grabbing land whenever they could was officially over. And the army was completely restructured, with way more British soldiers to keep the Indian sepoys in check. So, to try and calm everyone down, Queen Victoria issued a famous proclamation in 1858. And it was packed with promises. It guaranteed that the British wouldn't interfere with religious customs anymore. It ended that hated doctrine of lapse. It even declared that Indians would be treated as equals and could hold public office. Of course, as history would show, many of these promises were, well, let's just say they weren't always kept. Okay, so the dust settles. What's the real legacy of this incredibly violent, transformative event? What did it all mean in the long run? Well, it's really complicated. On one hand, for the very first time, people from all these different parts of India, different religions, had fought against a common enemy. This created common heroes like Rani Lakshmi Bai and Mangal Pandey, and it really planted the first seeds of a unified Indian nationalism. But on the other hand, the British learned a lesson too. They doubled down on their policy of divide and rule, deliberately creating friction between Hindus and Muslims to make sure they would never unite against them again. A deep, ugly chasm of mistrust and racism opened up between the British and the Indians. And that, right there, is the essential thing to understand. The revolt was crushed, yes. Militarily, it was a failure for the rebels. But psychologically, it was a massive turning point. It marked the end of an older style of resistance and the beginning of a new national idea. The beginning of the long and very difficult road to an independent India.